episode 1 of The Lowdown. My name's Dax Dixon, and I'm joined by Lindsay Brock. And today, Lindsay, we get to focus on you because what we're going to do is discuss kind of your journey, early life into your career, and then touch on your financial journey as well and things you've learned along the way that you'll be hopefully you think that are useful to others. So that being said, Lindsay, how did you end up in finance?
Oh gosh, that's a loaded question, Dax. And I think I have a bit of an interesting journey. I actually started off as a music major. I was going to do vocal performance, and that didn't work out because it just wasn't fun anymore when you're doing it for those intense purposes. So I switched to a really great, helpful major of politics and pre-law, which I obviously also didn't go into. So graduating in 2009, the job market was a little bit frothy, and I got a job actually at a hedge fund as an assistant. And so, getting coffee and salads for the executives there, and really not even knowing what I was doing or what kind of company I was working for. I learned what a hedge fund was before I even knew what a stock or a bond was. And I think that's a pretty unique position to be in when you're 22. And then from there, I kind of grew into what does finance mean to me, and what are all these things that make up what personal wealth and finances mean to everybody. I learned what a 401k is, and then fell into private wealth and talking to families and individuals about what their finances could build for their goals throughout their lives.
Sure. And so what do you currently do here at Stearns Financial?
Yeah. I'm a financial advisor, a wealth manager. So I talk to families and clients about their goals, what they want to accomplish in life, and how they can get there. And I focus a little bit more on the financial planning side. So I do run financial plans for our clients that span their lives, basically cash flow projections to see what scenarios you can change to make tweaks for the better, or that things that might challenge you along the way. But I really enjoy getting to know our clients and families and what they want to accomplish over their lifetime. That's the best part.
Yeah, absolutely. So, we go through life and we learn different things, whether that's financial or non-financial, that we may carry into the future. Are there one or two things that you thought about money or finances when you were maybe a teenager, early adulthood, that as you transitioned and learned more about the industry, learned more about personal finance and wealth management, that maybe you changed your thoughts on?
Yeah. That's a great question. And actually, I'm probably, if you were to have asked my family back in, the 90s, if I would ever be in finance, they would have laughed at you because I was the spender. I never saved a penny. Anytime I got a gift, I wanted to buy a new toy. And so I definitely was not the most
back
savvy.
In the 90s.
Yeah. And so I definitely was the least expected to follow this career path. So I think I learned a lot along the way about personal savings and about looking at your forward-looking goals, those goals that you might not have for, another 5, 10, 15, 20 years, and thinking about priorities along the way. Another thing I think I learned pretty well is my father was a police officer and my mother was a nurse. And so they both had pensions and they didn't have to worry about saving for themselves that much because their careers provided for them in retirement. And so between Social Security and their pension options, they really didn't have to have too much invested in the way of IRAs or 401ks, 403bs. And they really didn't worry too much about what tax bracket they were in. And we lived comfortably, but comfortably middle class. And so nothing really was challenging them to change the status quo. So I think that's really been interesting to look back at the way I grew up and see what we could have done better and what maybe challenged my parents that they just didn't care to learn about.
Yeah, it's interesting. There's not a lot of pensions left for us millennials around, right? So unless you're in a lucky few jobs out there, probably need to be planning to save in a retirement account outside of work at least, or maybe even through a 401k. That being said, you are in what we are calling the growth phase where you're growing your family, and obviously, you're a wealth advisor here at Stearns. What are some of the key challenges that you think people in that phase face when it comes to their finances?
Yeah, well, I definitely think I would be remiss to not mention the fact that being a working mother is the hardest thing I've ever had to balance in my life so far. I give every woman out there credit, whether she chooses to be a working mother, whether she chooses to be a full-time mom at home, or whether she chooses not to have children, anything. I mean, this is a challenge that we all face in our 20s, 30s, 40s that is difficult on all ends. And gosh, I underestimated it.
Yeah.
But hopefully I'm balancing it relatively well. And so I think that balance is huge to remember, especially for our female listeners. And I can't speak to the men because, I'm not one, but I think that also balancing your career versus your personal goals is pretty challenging, right? So where do I like to spend my time? Do I want to learn more when I'm outside of work to further my career, whether that's in leadership or in areas that I don't focus in necessarily, but that might help me in the future? Or do I use the time for my family or personal growth, or taking my kid to the park? It's always a balance. It's always a challenge, and knowing the priorities, right? So do we redo our kitchen, which will help us with our family needs in the next 10 years, 15 years, or do we invest toward our kids' college future, right? So start a 529 for them, or is it some kind of mix of the two? A lot of that has been definitely the balance that we toy with every day. And it's one that obviously my husband and I talk at length about, but it's a conversation that I think needs to be had between each, in each family or each couple, and with any financial professionals that you work with.
Perfect. All right, Lindsay, well, I appreciate you sharing a bit of your story and journey so far. I know that obviously balancing some of what you're doing at home and work during this phase of your life is challenging for sure. And hopefully through this series, we're able to shed some lights on some techniques and thoughts that may help others. But before we go, any parting thoughts?
I'm looking forward to all of this. I'm looking forward to getting to know our audience and helping across the US, anybody that might want to find advisors out there that are like them and in this growth phase. So I think this is going to be fun. I look forward to also getting to know a lot more about you, Dax. So Dax, my first question for you is, can you tell us a little bit more about your journey into the financial career that you have?
Yeah, I started out in Eastern North Carolina, grew up with a single mom and a sister. I was lucky enough to attend the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, go Hills. And, I didn't really have a career plan while I was there. My mom's a nurse, very unfamiliar with the business world. And so I happened to take economics, and then out of college, got a job at a mutual fund company where I worked for a number of years and learned more about the industry during that period, and was able to, obviously learn about what a mutual fund is, what a stock is, what a bond is, how you allocate a portfolio, et cetera, et cetera. So that's probably my earliest entry into, I guess, the financial world, and been working in it ever since.
Can you tell us what you do now? What's your career like now, and where do you work now?
Sure. So I'm a wealth advisor in Chapel Hill. So I help with all the clients that are here in our Chapel Hill office. I also am a portfolio manager at Stearns and sit on the investment committee. So that involves everything from trading accounts, portfolio construction, making investment recommendations, doing due diligence on, any strategy that we might be considering putting into our portfolio. So I work hand in hand with the other members of the committee to kind of make some of those decisions.
What about when you think back to your early life or your early career, maybe even your teenage years, what's something that has changed in your mind or that you've learned along the way?
Yeah, it's kind of funny when you think about how you grew up and how impactful that can be for you down the line, and everything from your political beliefs to your financial beliefs to your personal beliefs. No matter what, there's certainly some lasting impact there, whether it was intentional or unintentional. But I do remember the one thing that I had to change is that whenever we received, I say we, my mom, because she was the only working adult in our house, whenever, she got a sort of a windfall. So in this case, something like a tax return, it felt like that was because she mostly lived paycheck to paycheck. And so it felt like this euphoric thing where it's almost like binge eating on Thanksgiving. It's the one day of the year, like all of a sudden we're flush with cash. And so, not binge eating, but there's elements of binge spending, whether that's buying a big ticket item or whether that's, spending on a trip or something like that, where we, she didn't have the ability to do that outside of those moments. And so as I got into adulthood and as I, was paid bonuses and things like that, I noticed that early on, I had that dopamine dump. Same thing. It's like, okay, now we can go on a trip. Now I can buy, a new TV or whatever. And then I think through time, I had to learn how to control that impulse. So that positive jolt of dopamine in your brain wants you to do one thing. So how do you control that? But how do you balance out, like, you do have a windfall. So spending some of it might be okay, but maybe not spending all of it. So I think just like everything else, whether it's health, whether it's personal beliefs, there's challenges to balancing that out in a healthy way, in a way that's, I guess, sustainable. And I think that's one thing that I had to learn through time, is how to manage windfalls a little bit better. So
yeah. Well, that's a great story, Max. Last question I have for you is, obviously you and I are both in that growth phase that we are excited to help people through and talk through some of the biggest topics that are on our minds and our peers' minds. But what are some issues or topics that are particularly challenging to you or others that you might be talking to in your growth phase?
Yeah, I think that this could change depending on the phase that you're in. I in particular am recently married. So I got married in February of this year, which is, it's been nice. I think what's challenging is that I'd been single for all of my adult life. I'd never been married, right? And so making financial decisions was a Dax Dixon decision. It wasn't a Dax Dixon and wife decision. And she's not a financial professional. She's actually an attorney. And so, I feel that I have some background to help, whether that's how we're investing, how we're structuring accounts, things like that. So balancing kind of my expertise without trying to control that narrative completely with her, because that's very difficult, because I don't want to be the one, pushing that all the time. But I'm also worried that in the classic hit by the bus scenario, which, by the way, we always say, like, if I'm hit by a bus, but rarely is anybody hit by a bus, right? So anyways, in the classic hit by a bus scenario, I want her to be able to manage those finances. So I think it's difficult on one hand to make joint financial decisions, especially when there's a tension between what one of you wants to do short term and what might be better for the family long term. And I also think the other part of it is not leveraging my expertise in a way that would make her incapable in my absence of managing finances. So I think kind of balancing that out is proved challenging. I'm sure I'm not the only person that's ever experienced this. Putting finances together can be quite complicated depending on how you think about using money and how your spouse or significant other might think about it. There's going to be conflicts involved there.
Yeah. And especially when emotions are involved, and also you want to empower her and she wants to trust you. And I'm sure it's the dynamic there is difficult. I face it to some extent with my husband too.
Yeah, because like you said, I do want to empower her, but she might be like, I don't want to be empowered. I don't want to look at your spreadsheets. You just tell me how much bills are and take care of it, please. But you can't totally do that, right? So
Right. Well, this has been a great conversation. Any other parting thoughts before we finish up this episode?
No, I think this has been fun, Lindsay. Thank you. And I think that I'm really looking forward to kind of covering some of those high level topics that are really important in this age, because it's hard to get good information. It's even harder to get it organized. So thank you so much for helping me with this. And hopefully, we'll be able to help others.
Good. Well, awesome. Thank you so much for joining us this time for the Lowdown. I'm Lindsay Brock, and this is Dax Dixon, our co-hosts for our podcast. We're looking forward to diving into some more high-level topics with you next time.